Peter Credlin, live from News24.
Good evening. Welcome to the program. Here's what's coming up tonight on Credlin. The war on seniors, Labor's private health shake-up, and the brutal tax hit facing pensioners who just want to keep working a bit longer. And you know what? All of this just puts more pressure on Medicare in the end. I'll explain that in a moment, plus a campaign to ditch the loophole that's allowed convicted rapists to keep their identity hidden, as critics warn Victoria's suppression rules must be reformed. Here, everyone wants to dodge talk of One Nation and the Coalition working together. Yet in the United Kingdom, there's a deal on the table between the UK Reform Party and Restore. Plus, Tony Abbott's Operation Sovereign Borders British style. The former PM joins me as Nigel Farage imports his Stop the Boats plan into the UK. And more on the plunging property market, $230 billion now wiped off the value of your home, and coalition data that shows tens of thousands of Australians who bought a house with a 5% deposit, well, they're now teetering on the edge of negative equity.
This is the result of Labor's taxes.
Government ministers, as you saw yesterday, don't even seem to understand the concept of negative equity.
The government had no idea this was going to happen, and they're making it up as they go along.
We will stay with Australia's housing crisis. If you think it's hard to be a first home buyer, try watching the value of your home slide into freefall, because that's what's happening as Australia's hit with a once-in-a-generation housing slump as the result of catastrophic tax changes in the recent May budget. So let's get our head across the scale of the problem. Australia's got a population of sub 27 million, and across the country there's roughly around 11.5 million separate dwellings. So in broad terms, as the Reserve Bank will tell us, about 1/3 of those dwellings are rented, about 1/3 are owned outright, and about 1/3 are being paid off with a mortgage. Now, for most of us, me included, our homes are our biggest asset. Not only are they a roof over our head, but they represent financial security, because we know if we had to, we could liquidate our home, pay off the mortgage, and potentially downsize. Or so we thought. That's not guaranteed anymore, because that only works if the home is worth more than what we owe. And that's the big headache for the Albanese government, isn't it? With news today that $230 billion has been wiped off property values across the board, meaning some of us might have a home that is already in negative equity, a home where what we owe to the bank is more than what we would get if we had to sell it. Today, the Coalition released modelling that estimates that 34,000 Australians could well be in this very predicament. But embarrassingly, Labor's Assistant Minister Matt Thistlethwaite exposed himself as not knowing the difference between negative equity and mortgage repayment defaults.
99% of people have met their repayments or are ahead on their mortgages, which means they can't be in negative equity because they're ahead on their mortgage repayments.
No, that's not true.
The scheme is working very well.
That's not how it works, mate.
No, it's not how it works. Sorry, man. That is not what negative equity means. Negative equity is when the value of your loan is greater than the value of your asset. In other words, you owe more on your home than what you would get if you tried to sell it. Now, Thistlethwaite, a Labor frontbencher, says on his CV that he's got an economics degree. So the level of ignorance in the government is staggering. Last night on this network, former Labor Minister Stephen Conroy also tried to ridicule any suggestion that negative equity or falling house values in Australia were a concern.
Michael? The economically illiterate argument about negative equity. Stop stealing from an American housing market. No one is trying to buy a house today and sell it tomorrow, therefore they've suffered the fall. Absolute drivel.
Well, good try, Stephen, but prop track data says otherwise. Between March and July this year, and let's not forget the budget tax changes were speculated for weeks and weeks before the May budget, Australian home values fell some $230 billion. Further, there are fears that a 10% decline, as some will predict, could wipe more than $1 trillion from the market. Now, what's also worth noting, beyond the loss of value in any home you own right now, is the increased liability that we all bear as taxpayers. Because of Labor's 5% home deposit scheme, all of us, every taxpayer, well, we now carry $11 billion of property liability on the budget books. This scheme, that's more than quintupled since Labor came to power in 2022, is also controversial due to recent revelations that those accessing this taxpayer help do not even need to be an Australian citizen. And we know that there's some 50,000 non-citizens who've already got onto the scheme, something that Liberal leader Angus Taylor says he would not allow.
I'm appalled by revelations in recent weeks that nearly 50,000 non-citizens have used Labor's first home buyer 5% deposit scheme. Labor opened this scheme to permanent residents in 2023, but such a loan scheme, financed by the Australian taxpayer, should be reserved for Australian citizens.
Well, spot on, Angus. And as I discussed here on the program last night, incredibly, this scheme will now help people get into a home even if they earn just shy of $700,000, so $750,000 per couple.
This is a classic one where if you are wealthy enough, you have enough income coming through the door, you should not and do not need the assistance to get into your first home, because likelihood is you can afford that anyway. And so the government is literally giving money away for no good reason.
Yes, house prices are cyclical, but periods of rapid price increases tend to be followed by slow or no increases. Rarely do we see big price hikes and then big price falls or big losses in value. But that's where it appears we are now, post-Labor's catastrophic May budget, despite the spin from ministers like this.
There's never been a better time to be a first home buyer. Not in my lifetime has there been a better time to be a first home buyer in Australia. I'm so happy to see more than 260,000 individuals and couples have made use of our 5% deposit.
But this is early days, and this is a reform which will play out not only over months but over years.
Over the long term, Treasury is very clear that there will be a sustainable increase in house prices, and the Reserve Bank has said that less than 1% of borrowers actually are facing any sense of negative equity.
I don't trust them. Labor ministers wanting to assure us that house price falls are a good thing, that everything will rebound. Well, that's no comfort. One of their own doesn't even know a term as important as negative equity. All right, before I move into the news of the day, I just want to highlight just how patriotic so many of you are, because the flag images that have been flooding into my email account from you are a sign that our country is on a very different wavelength than what perhaps our Prime Minister would have us believe. Now, as you can see across the TV screens right now, we've got backyards, we've got front yards, we've got farm fences, verandas, men's sheds, kitchens, lounge rooms, cars, utes, and of course, flagpoles right across our great brown land, adorned with Australia's national flag. Our only national flag, let me make that one clear. The Prime Minister, well, he likes to stand in front of 3 flags. 2 of them belong to only some of us. And only one of those flags, our national flag, well, that one belongs to all of us. Australia has many official flags, be they military flags or flags like the Aboriginal flag. Official, yes, but only our national flag is protected with its own Act of Parliament. And that's how it should be. Now, nothing gives me more hope for our future than to see your response to our flag. And when I read your emails that accompanied those pictures, and again, they're on the screen right now, and I've read all of the emails, I promise you, the reasons as to why you are flying the flag, what it means to you, And in many instances, the special event or the family tragedy that prompted you to fly it as proudly as you do, well, that speaks volumes. It speaks volumes about the sort of good people who watch this program, but also to where the real heart and soul of our country is. And as we all know too well, that's not in Canberra, is it? And it's certainly not in the Prime Minister's office. I promise you I have flags and flags for weeks to come. Let's go to Canberra now for the headlines. Our political reporter, Reuben Spargo.
Good evening. The acting Prime Minister is playing down fears of a broader housing downturn. The Coalition claims 34,000 buyers who accessed Labor's 5% deposit scheme are at risk of falling into negative equity.
Over the time in which people would own a home, you see housing prices grow, and they will continue to grow.
Labor's recent tax changes are seemingly colliding with the 3 interest rate hikes this year. Independent Senator David Pocock is calling on the Treasurer to fix the budget's so-called widow tax. People who co-own an investment property can lose access to negative gearing if their partner dies or they separate.
Terribly sorry for your loss. Please pay up. Well, I think that speaks volumes of exactly what Labor's toxic taxes can do.
Pauline Hanson says David Pocock and I don't always agree, but he's dead right on this. He shouldn't have to fight it alone. Australia's biggest betting companies are rejecting allegations of predatory behaviour, insisting there is no systemic problem. Former NRL player Luke Bateman alleges gambling company staff offered to organise illicit drugs while cultivating him as a high-value customer.
There's definitely not a systematic issue with the offering of illegal products, and there's no culture of that kind of business within the regulated, licensed onshore market.
Labor's proposed gambling reforms are being examined as part of an 8-week Senate inquiry.
All right, let's get into all of that now with our News24 political editor, Andrew Clennell. G'day, Andrew. I heard you just before 5 o'clock. You took on Tanya Plibersek over the comments she made, I think it was yesterday morning, that this is the best time to be a first home buyer. Now, Parliament's back next week. Across the board, we've got a litany of unintended consequences out of the budget. The house falls, we've talked about, negative equity, the whole widows tax debacle. Obviously, this gives the red meat there for the opposition to run on now, doesn't it?
Well, it does. Let's see if they can do it effectively. And let's see if they can get mileage out of it. Because I just think they need to stick to a couple of themes and really hammer away at them. And I'll even look, I said to Matt Canavan the other day, that indexation on tax, where's that gone? No one even knows about it, that policy. You know, the mistake I think they're making, Peter, and you're an expert in this field, is they are just not saying stuff until they want to vomit. And that's what you got to do. And that's because they're freaked out by One Nation, who anything they say gets a run. But you've just got to get slicker lines, and you've just got to keep hammering away at them. And you've got to come up with a couple of clever, widow's tax is a good one. You've got to come up with these phrases that capture the imagination, that get the grab out there, or whether it's a house price dump or house price disaster or, Angus and his team, they really lack that, I think. They've really got a bit of work to do on that front.
Well, it's a bit like fire the lion, mate. I mean, you're absolutely right. You've got to frame the issue. You've got to frame whether it's a trust issue, whether it goes to character, whether it's sort of a personality trait, or it's, your political opponent. Frame them in terms of who they are. But also you've got to frame the issue because, as you know, governments profit from the complexity of some of these things. I mean, part of the reason that they've got away with saying renewables are cheap is because people go, well, wind and solar are free, right? Well, the sun's free at least, but they're not once they understand, and they are understanding this now. It costs a lot to put the infrastructure in and get the power from the source to the market. Now that they understand those complex issues, Australians are walking away from supporting renewables. But that's taken about 10 years of dogged debate in the community. And I just don't think the Liberals hammer stuff often enough, frequently enough. And sometimes I look on the TVs and I don't feel like they're out in the field enough.
Yep. But you know what? Governments can profit on complexity, but they can lose on complexity. And this tax thing's a case in point because people think that any old inheritance, not just capital gains tax properties, not just investment properties would be hit by this. And that's not true. It would just be investment properties and it doesn't come until mid next year. So it's presumably going to be fixed by then. But if you follow what I'm saying, people just hear tax, housing, they're not in the weeds of negative gearing and capital gains. And therefore, this is where I think the government could find itself in a bit of trouble. Because I think a lot of people don't understand these changes and think they're more far-reaching than they are. I'm not saying they're not far-reaching, but I just think there's so much ground there. Like, I mean, Tanya's comment, I mean, I couldn't believe it, really. I mean, you know, house prices $1 million median in Adelaide and Perth.
It's so out of touch.
It's insane. And it's never been a worse time to be a first-home buyer. And the problem they've got is they're trying to create this mirage that this is the thing which is going to make things affordable. If this was a thing to make things more affordable, it needed to happen 10 years ago because the horses bolted. They're never going to get the price down. So they're going to end up annoying two cohorts, right? They're not going to be able to satisfy the first home buyer or enough of them. And they're going to annoy the people with existing homes who see their paper loss. So you end up in a situation you're not pleasing
And there's
anyone.
a lot more of the latter than the former,
Totally.
mate. As you know, there's a lot more of the latter than the former.
Even if you're doing it on principle, and I don't believe they are, I think they're doing it for the base and to pretend they're doing something. It's not effective enough. It's too late. That's the problem they've got. And so why the opposition can't go with this. And the other aspect that the opposition needs to hammer away at, excuse me, Peter, is I remember myself when I was saving for a deposit. What do, right? You buy shares. That's one of the things I did to save for a deposit all those many years ago. Young people do that. They're pretty smart. They buy these EFTs or ETFs or whatever they're called. The capital gains changes on that stuffs them. So even the saving up to the deposit is hurt by these changes. There's just so much room. If the opposition just wants to be patient and hammer away and hammer away and hammer away, and I don't see a lot of that. I just see, going to a small business roundtable, getting asked again about One Nation, just not that real political skill. You need some skill in this business. And I don't think the opposition has enough at the moment. It's as simple as that. But a guy like James Patterson has the capacity to do it. Not many others do. Hasty comes out with some good lines, but he's a bit, you wouldn't put all your hope in him. Where's the great white hope for these guys? They don't really have it. And you mightn't need it, except you got One Nation.
Just quickly, I want to ask you about Luke Gosling. I saw that interview with Mark Butler, the health minister, on the weekend. This limp justification that he doesn't have to stand down because he hasn't got a fair income role. He's only a special envoy. Well, if it isn't really that important, why do we even have it? And, of course, when Parliament returns, all the hypocrisy from Albanese about others who've had allegations and stood aside when it's happened, to the coalition, this bloke's been charged and he's still in his job.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting. So what do you do? Do you go more retail or do you go for that? Because you don't get many questions with the crossbench the way it is. I don't mind spending a day on Gosling because I'm like, you're such a hypocrite on this stuff. It goes
to the Prime Minister's character. It's less about Gosling and it's more about character.
It's hubris writ large. I mean, one of the reasons I took this on as a journalist on Sunday is because I could scarcely believe that, someone who went on about standards so much is so failing in implementing standards. I mean, you just can't let these guys get away with this, whether you're an opposition or a journalist, in my view.
But that's the whole issue with Gina Rinehart and the ABC. I mean, every single one of the ministers I've seen over the last 3 days have said, I haven't seen it, but I don't like the idea of what I've been told. You and I know they will have all watched it. Their officers would have watched it. Every minister's been briefed. There's clearly a line gone out of Labor head office to say, don't acknowledge that you've watched it, pretend you haven't seen it, go to the principal, hold the line, independence of the ABC. You can personally not like it. I mean, I know exactly how the game is played here, but the Prime Minister can't crow about misogyny. He can't go after ditch the witch billboards, and the witch is gone, I might add, dished by a Labor man. You can't go on about that at the same time as you can't say that someone like Gina Rinehart, who isn't even in politics, deserves an apology and that stuff should be down right now off the ABC's platform.
I think they're hardening their language on it. Like, I think Miles was a bit better today, but yeah, I mean, it's disgraceful stuff, right? And yeah, again, it smacks of double standards. So you've really got a bit to work with. The double standards on the Gosling and this, particularly Gosling in my view. The tax changes, you could build the narrative. They don't really know what they're doing. They're collapsing the housing market. They're actually hurting first home buyers and young people. And you just push and push and push on that, and there's opportunity for the first time. Albanese still ahead on TPP. One Nation's helping him with the Libs. Still got 94 seats. That's where hubris can creep in. And particularly when, you know, I mean, I just think journalists need to go a bit harder, frankly. I mean, I'm not going to be critical of other journalists, but, I mean, we've got a situation here where these guys have too much of an advantage, and that's never good for a political system.
I'm looking forward to you getting back to Canberra, mate. I think you've been missing and are much needed. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Andrew Cladell. Now to that extraordinary legal loophole that's allowed two recent high-profile convicted rapists, these are in two separate cases in Melbourne, the loophole that has allowed them to retain their anonymity even after they've been convicted. We'll examine this right now. Tom Silvani was one, and Ralph Carr, sensationally named yesterday, both found guilty of rape, have become the latest examples of convicted men who have applied successfully to have their identities suppressed, at least for a short period of time. Although it's been a while in Carr's case, I'll get to that in a moment, it's prompted questions as to how defendants have been able to obtain suppression orders, convincing a judge that exposing their identities will somehow impact their mental health. Savvy barristers, of course, have been taking advantage of this for some time. The critics say, we've got to change the system. Justin Quill's a veteran media lawyer, partner at top law firm Thompson's, and he joins me now. You've been on the front line of this, Justin, for a long time. You've written across the News Corp papers today that this sort of secret justice carries all sorts of promises and issues, problems and issues, I'm sorry to say. Justice is supposed to be transparent. I get suppressing the name of the victim, fine, but why are, in this case, convicted perpetrators getting to keep their name out of the media?
Yeah, well, they shouldn't be. And of course, we're talking about two high-profile cases, but I can tell you there are dozens of them, not just rape cases. There's all sorts of defendants out there who have been able to achieve anonymity through this, I say, loophole in the law. And the way it's done, and I might say Carr was for 3 years, I think Tom Silvani across 4 different courts, the Magistrates Court, the County Court, the Supreme Court, and even up into the Court of Appeal, and 12 different hearings with 2 barrister teams, managed to keep their names secret for combined 5 years, 3 for Carr, 2 for Silvani. The way they do it is go along to a psychiatrist, tell the psychiatrist a whole stack of things. The psychiatrist makes a report and says their mental harm's in danger. That goes in and becomes evidence. We can't test what the psychiatrist has been told. And it's not the psychiatrist's job to cross-examine their patient, to fact-check what they're being told. So effectively, they're able to get this evidence in by filtering it through the psychiatrist. And it's just wrong in my view, and it allows this sort of secret justice to happen. And I hate to think what the victims think about it all.
It's pretty bad in Victoria. Is Victoria the suppression capital of Australia?
There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. Let's look at the numbers. Victoria, wait for it, Victoria has more suppression orders made every year, and has done for a number of years, more suppression orders made every year than every other state in the country combined. It's probably the same for our state debt, I suspect, but every single state added up together doesn't have as many suppression orders as we have here in Victoria. So I might say that's not just mental harm suppression orders, we're talking generally. So there's a real problem with these mental harm suppression orders, but there's a bigger, broader cultural problem here that means there's that many suppression orders made.
James Dewberry, who's the Shadow Attorney General for the Liberal Party in Victoria, he says there'll be reform. What does reform look like? What needs to change, Justin Quill?
Well, look, firstly, just on this mental harm suppression order issue, it's really simple. The law that says you can make a suppression order to protect someone's safety, which is being used, was never thought about as mental safety, but is now being used that way, just needs to be changed to physical safety from another person. So where there is an informer giving evidence against a crook or a bikie or someone, and they are in danger, sure, they should get a suppression order to protect their physical safety from someone else. So that's an easy change. Beyond that, there needs to be cultural change in Victoria that just limits the number of suppression orders being made. That's obviously a bigger task, but I hope this does become a real election issue. It should.
And just before we go, we're expecting the release of an IBAC report related to Daniel Andrews and the Firefighters Union. That's also been the subject of debate and legal action to keep that from the public domain as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, look, I appeared in the Tom Silvani and Ralph Carr matters, but I also appeared in the Operation Richmond suppression order hearing as well. That felt a little bit like going into a boxing ring with one or two hands tied behind my back, because I wasn't really able to see the material that I was trying to argue against. So it was very, very difficult. Ultimately, we were able to identify or unmask who it was that was trying to keep that report secret, but we weren't able to unmask what it is that they're trying to keep secret. So looking forward to that finally. I think is it 7 years or maybe even 9 years since these allegations were first occurred, and we still haven't had this report released. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Do we have a release date? Have you got any understanding when that might be?
I hope it's tomorrow. I don't think it is. I don't. The short answer is I don't know, Peta, but I hope it's sooner rather than later.
I'm getting tomorrow in my ear as well. Justin Quill, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your fighting for transparency and free speech there as well. All right, after the break, they say imitation's the greatest form of flattery. So what does Tony Abbott make of Nigel Farage basically doing a cut and paste of Abbott's Stop the Boats policy, Operation Sovereign Borders? And will it work for the mess that is the English Channel? John Howard, too, on multiculturalism. Abbott says it's failed. Where's Howard on this? That'll be interesting. We'll talk about that one after the break. Welcome back. I'll get you the latest on the Spanish border crisis, including an emerging conspiracy that the Moroccan government orchestrated the whole thing. That's coming out with Sophie Ellsworth. But staying on the issue of illegal migration, overnight in the UK, Nigel Farage and his Home Affairs spokesman Zia Youssef laid out their vision to stop the stream of illegal boat arrivals into the UK once and for all. And Australia seemingly has provided the blueprint.
They tried offshore processing. They tried a number of things. And in the end, what worked was towing the boats back to Indonesia. And since then, hardly a boat has landed in Australia. I am entirely confident that under a reform government, within a fortnight, there would be no more boats.
Let's discuss this now. Former PM, now, of course, Federal Liberal Party President Tony Abbott. I don't know about the fortnight. He has got a big problem and the channel is narrower. And I don't know that France is as accommodating as Indonesia was in the end to us. But, you know, they've got to do something. And it is almost every single element in this plan from your Operation Sovereign Borders.
You're right, Peter. It's a carbon copy of Operation Sovereign Borders. There are two elements that are absolutely essential. The first is being prepared to send boats back. If needs be, send people back in unsinkable life rafts, which is what my government did. The second is disrupting these people gangs on land, and largely with the cooperation of the Indonesians, that's what we did. And the issue for The British government is how much cooperation will they get from the French, but it has to happen. By hook or by crook, it just has to happen, because what's happening across the English Channel now is a peaceful invasion.
And of course we saw those shocking scenes out of that Spanish territory too.
And this is where Europe collectively has been incredibly weak. If you lose control of your borders, in the end, you lose your sovereignty. And Europe has now tolerated what amounts to a peaceful invasion for over a decade.
Last night I discussed the question of religion, particularly the Jewish religion on the 2026 census, and I got some of the history wrong. It wasn't a ticker box option, as I said, in 2021. In fact, the ABS has clarified it. Jews have always had to write tick other and write in Judaism. Now, I wish that would change. I'd like to see that change. But I'd also like to see an option too, Tony, to tick the box on Christian, because if you look down that list and your particular Christian church is not there, and a lot of churches are not there, or if you're not a church-going Christian, but you still are of the Christian faith, you've got to sort of be told it's okay to tick other and write in Christian. And I think there's a game on to make religion disappear in this country from the left, and I'd like to see this fixed on the census.
Well, there's no doubt that the Green left establishment is deeply uncomfortable with Australia's core Anglo-Celtic culture and with our foundational Judeo-Christian ethos. I certainly think that if Anglicanism and Catholicism and Buddhism and Islam are specifically nominated on the form, why not Judaism? Because Jewish people and people of Jewish faith have been part of modern Australia since the First Fleet.
Front page of The Australian the other day, John Howard said that this debate about monoculture versus multiculturalism is pointless. The inference, he didn't specifically say, but the inference is that it's sort of a false debate. Now, I support a monoculture. I think we should all have a unifying singular culture in this country. You say multiculturalism's failed. Are you at odds here with John Howard?
Well, if you read John Howard's article, as I did, he said that he had never been comfortable with the term multiculturalism. He had tried to avoid using it. In the end, I think he settled on something called Australian multiculturalism to distinguish it from Canadian multiculturalism, which is, I suppose, a product of Canada's unique history. Personally, I've never been very comfortable with the term multiculturalism. And as you know, Peter, I've contrasted the concept of Team Australia, where we are all barracking for this great country, with the concept of Hotel Australia, where people are just living here and making the most of the facilities. And I just think that we've got to remember that we are all part of Team Australia. And if we're not part of Team Australia, why are we here? I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? Now, John Howard, to his credit, often said that the things that unite us as Australians should always be more important than anything that divides us. And right now, I'd like to see a lot more stress on our unity and a lot less on our diversity.
I think, though, from the time of John Howard and Tony Abbott, there's been a real project from the left to tear us apart. I don't remember identity politics right down to denial of biology. Issues like that and three flags behind the Prime Minister being such a feature of our country like it is now.
You're right. And again, this is where Howard was right to contrast the post-war immigration, where people were referred to as new Australians, and they were encouraged and expected to integrate from day one and to assimilate as quickly as possible, with the post-Whitlam concept of multiculturalism, which in this era of ethnic grants and all the rest of it can easily become a form of ethnic separatism. To use Jeff Blaney's phrase, we can become a nation of tribes, often hostile tribes, and we just have to get right away from that.
Quick one, you're a former health minister. There hasn't been enough focus, I don't think, on this decision by the government to strip away the extra rebate that people over the age of 65 got to help them keep private health insurance. And I tell you why it upsets me, because, you know, the government says it's a saving. Sure, it's a tiny saving, but it's not a real saving because that extra money from the rebate is nowhere near enough to look after these older Australians who will cost more given their age in the healthcare system. They will cost more because the moment they drop their PHI, their private health insurance, as you know, they'll end up on Medicare. But the flippant response from Mark Butler on the weekend really got under my skin. Have a listen.
Our independent modelling done by our officials suggests that maybe at most 44,000 people out of several million would drop off private health insurance because of this measure. That's a very small percentage, not even 1%, not even half a percentage point, at a time when insurance is growing. And obviously, you know, most of them wouldn't be using the public hospital system anyway.
Now, it's $800 a year minimum if you're a single once you lose this rebate. The hit's $1,600 or more if you're a couple. Where does he think the pensioners, people are going to get this money?
Well, exactly right, Peter. Particularly pensioners and superannuants, they can't just go out and earn more money to cope with this extra hit. In my time as Health Minister, this was something that actually saved the government money. It was a genuine investment because by helping older people to take out private health insurance, we were actually reducing the costs on the public health system.
Yeah, so let me make that clear for people at home. So if they were getting a 30% rebate, so 30% back from the taxpayer, they were still paying 70% of it themselves.
Correct.
Of course, if they're not, if they're on Medicare, it's 100% paid by the taxpayer.
Correct. So this was one of those occasions when judicious government spending can actually reduce the overall costs to government. It's the old story. If you've got a government which is essentially a tax addict, and Anthony Albanese is a tax addict, they take away benefits, they increase costs, your economy goes downhill, and in the end, the whole thing is a long-term doom loop, and that's what we're on now, thanks to the Albanese government.
Yep, we can hit the oldies, can't we? But we can pay childcare for someone on $500,000 a year. It stinks, Tony Abbott. I'll leave it there. You're at Arnhem Land. I think I've got some pictures to put up on the screen. He was in Arnhem Land. He wasn't at the Talkfest Gama. He was actually out there on the tools doing some good work with Nova Peris to build facilities. There you can see them on the screen. All right, quick break. After the break, is there a deal between Reform and Restore to defeat Andy Burnham, the new government in the UK? It's climbing in the polls. We'll get to London in a moment. Welcome back. Coming up, I'm on a Unity ticket with Chris Minns. This is about terror laws. We'll get to that very shortly. But now to the latest on Spain's illegal migrant crisis. Authorities insist tens of thousands of migrants who surged across the border have now returned to Morocco. But new reports say the crisis is far from over. Migrants are allegedly using jet skis to reach mainland Spain. Thousands remain hiding in surrounding hills. And the pressure's mounting on the government over whether it's really regained control. And this impacts, of course, the people movements between Spain and Germany and Italy and all the other countries in the EU, which move to quickly suspend internal movement laws. Here to get us up to speed, News24 contributor, News Corp Australia's European correspondent, Sophie Ellsworth. Sophie, Santiago Aspagal, he's the leader of Spain's hard-right Vox party. He's been down to the region and he's called for the border with Morocco to stay permanently closed until Spain can guarantee it won't happen again.
Peter, this is incredibly concerning, these reports that have been coming out, seeing all this surge of illegal migrants crossing here. And it's put a lot of fear here in the UK that these illegal migrants will eventually arrive here in Britain. And it's just reignited the debate that Europe and the UK do not have control of their borders. Now, there has been talk from Spain that a lot of this reporting has been driven by false information or amplification on social media, and a lot of criticism of that. But Peter, there's no doubt that this crisis is far from over, and those images that we've seen spread around the world, President Donald Trump has described it as a catastrophe, and it's put European leaders on high alert.
What do you make of those reports that suggest Morocco's deep state may have deliberately relaxed the border controls as some sort of pressure tactic against Spain?
Well, of course, that has been one of the allegations that's come out of this, Peter. But there's so much information flying around with so many political points on this, it can sometimes be difficult to ascertain what is actually fact or fiction regarding this crisis. But again, it comes back to the point that prime ministers and presidents all throughout Europe and here in the UK are now discussing the issue of illegal migration right up at top of the agenda, because there are elections coming next year, including in Italy, and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, being the leader there, knows this is one of the very key issues that will be a hot topic.
Do you think that's why Nigel Farage released Reform UK's basically carbon copy of Australia's sovereign borders over the weekend? Did they jump on the timing of what's happened in Spain because they know it's top of mind with voters?
Well, Peter, there's no doubt that Nigel Farage has pounced at this time because this crisis is making front pages here in the UK. The weather, as you can see here behind me, is beautiful in England. It's been glorious for weeks on end, very warm here, great weather for illegal migrants to cross the channel. And there has been criticism that since the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, came into office, thousands have continued to cross that channel. He has not spoken about this, nor of getting a handle on the issue of the English Channel between England and France. So again, Nigel Farage is really seizing the moment.
Yeah, it feels like there's a real conspiracy in the British media in the way that we don't find in Australia, where they just don't raise topics, that they don't want to do anything to assist reform. A lot of it, as you know, has come down to Elon Musk or social media or Nigel Farage himself going out there to kick an issue along or get it into the public domain. There's talk now of a deal between Farage and Restore Britain. What can you tell us there, Sophie?
Well, that's right. There is this discussion that Restore UK and Reform UK may join forces coming into the next general election, which must be held by 2029. But Peter, I highly doubt this will come to fruition. Rupert Lowe, the leader of Restore, Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform, had a huge falling out. Rupert Lowe was booted out of Reform. They despise each other. I cannot see how this will work. It's been described by some commentators here as a very bad marriage if they were to join forces. But we did see in the latest poll here in the UK, Peter, that Labor at 25 points ahead of Reform at 24 points. It's the first time they've been ahead of them in quite some months. They're saying it's the Burnham bounce, but will it last?
We'll leave it there. You're right, that weather looks glorious. I'll let you get out and get amongst it. Sophie, thanks for joining me. After the break, the security cordon around One Nation leader Pauline Hanson, perhaps two candidates, is that going to help them politically or hinder them? My panel's up next. We'll go back now to the latest on a major anti-terrorism debate in New South Wales. Premier Chris Minns has vowed to close a legal loophole after the Supreme Court refused to place supervision orders on Yaqub Ben Shabir, the nephew of slain ISIS terrorist Khalid Sharif. Sharif, if you remember, had the children and the severed heads. Well, Ben Shabir was convicted this year over a 2024 assault of a gay couple. Was later charged while on bail over the alleged cache of pro-ISIS material before the charges were dropped, and was released in April after successfully appealing the sentence of the 2024 assault. The Premier says New South Wales anti-terror laws should err on the side of public safety. Here to discuss that and a whole lot more, my panel, News24 contributor Lucy Zellick and One Nation Senator for New South Wales, Sean Bell. Well, I'll tell you what, Lucy, I'm on an absolute unity ticket here with Chris Minns.
And I dare say many of us would be, Peter. Great to be with you. It's not often that we'll agree with Chris Minns, but on this front, I think, and particularly in his response to the Bondi massacre, he's someone that has been leading the way, politics aside, on all of this, regardless of which side of the aisle you sit. I think we can agree that what Chris Minns is advocating for something that we should all get behind. And his quote that basically pointed to the fact that he said we need anti-terror architecture in New South Wales that is strong and errs on the side of keeping the public safe is on the right trajectory here. We've seen that so far the New South Wales government made 3 attempts to try and slap terror control orders on this particular individual. But because of ambiguity in the wording of the law, that's why we now find ourselves in a situation where this individual walks free and without any supervision orders. The question is, when are we going to grow up as a nation? When are we going to recognise that in order to put our citizens first, we need to rejig our legislation as it stands to ensure that the people of this country don't have to endure another Bondi massacre?
You're not wrong. Recall the Parliament, crack on with it, Chris Minns. Let's go to that footage we saw last night of your boss, Pauline Hanson, in Melbourne. Not just, obviously, where you had to do your launch. It wasn't where you wanted. You wanted the steps of the Parliament, Sean, but also the scenes in the Melbourne suburb of Hawthorn. You know, John Howard, I was in a car with him many, many years ago when he was PM, and we turned up at an event and there was a whole lot of really angry, radical, lefty union types. And I said, oh, God, this is terrible. It's going to make the news tonight. And he said, well, I hope it does. That's exactly what ordinary Australians need to see. Now, is this a good thing for One Nation, do you think? Or is it going to make it more difficult for you to get around and about and talk to voters in Victoria?
Look, Peter, if people turning up and doing this had any effect on One Nation's capacity to get our message out to the Australian people, we wouldn't be doing as well as we are. I mean, this is something that they have tried on us for many, many decades, and it will continue to fail. I mean, nothing exposes the intolerance of the radical left like the way they react to a peaceful gathering of Conservatives who are here standing up for the best interests of Australians and Victorians. I mean, that was what we were doing, is we were participating in democracy, and nothing infuriates the radical left more than people who disagree with them participating in democracy. And unfortunately, I think a lot of this is tacitly supported by their Labor politicians. I mean, you hear them often talk about turning the temperature down, and we have seen some terrible tragedies that have occurred around the world with Charlie Kirk, for instance, and yet you don't ever see the Labor government telling these people to turn their temperature down. So, look, I want to give them a thank you for helping promote the event. You know, the haters are just another type of fan. But no, it's not going to affect us. We've got a thick skin, and, you know, we're here to deliver for the people of Australia and the people of Victoria that they were trying to prevent us helping.
Lucy, just a little while ago I spoke to Tony Abbott. We talked about the hit from the Albanese government on older Australians who've got private health insurance. What about this one today, a report that says people on the pension, if they want to do a little bit extra work or stay in the workforce a little longer, they're really hit hard. They end up with an effective marginal tax rate of some 106%. It feels to me they're being punished. And I made the point with Tony, if you want childcare help in this country, you can get it even if you earn $500,000, but we're going after pensioners.
It's devastating, isn't it, Peter? I think it was the late Pope Francis who said that a civilization is judged by how it treats its elderly and the place that it gives them in community life. And right now, the place that we are giving them is a 106% marginal tax rate if they earn over $65,000 and have $200K in super. It's a disgrace, and this is something that needs redressing immediately from the government, because the way that we're treating our elderly now, we are failing.
Not wrong, and they've paid taxes, I'll remind everybody. They've paid taxes all their lives. Lucy, Sean, I'm sorry it was a bit abbreviated tonight. Thank you very much. See you both next week. That's it for me. I'll see you tomorrow night. More flags too. I've got a lot. They'll keep coming. Here's Andrew.